Today, as you all know, we have Kristen Radtke, Jordan Crane, and here to introduce them is Libby Flores. She is a writer in her own right and the director of literary programs at Penn Center USA. Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. We are here tonight to celebrate the LA launch of Kristen Radtke's graphic memoir, which is beautiful, called Imagine Wanting Only This. I'm going to need to hear that really loud. Yes. Okay. Most of you know me, some of you know me, and but I know that you trust me and you trust my taste and you trust Skylight's taste, so you're in the right place. And I don't know if you know Jordan Crane's work, but it's beautiful, exquisite, and very poignant, and you're going to get a taste of both of them. Their books, shortly, because we're going to have a reading. And if you've never been to a graphic novel or a memoir reading, this is a really fun experience. It's a visual experience, as you can imagine. So that's all the fun stuff there. So I'm going to properly introduce them, and then we're going to have Jordan Crane read first. So Kristen Radtke is a writer and illustrator based in Brooklyn. She's the managing editor of Saraband Books and the film and video editor of the Tri-Quarterly magazine. She holds an MFA from the University of Iowa's nonfiction writing program. Her illustrations have appeared in the New Yorker, Virginia Quarterly Review, Oxford American, the Daily Beast, and the Paris Review. Let's welcome Kristen to LA. I almost said New York. Jordan Crane is an American cartoonist. He's best known for his graphic novella, The Last Lonely Saturday, his graphic novel, The Clouds Above, and his ongoing solo anthology comic book series, Uptight, which I did have here, which I think they have here tonight. His illustrations have appeared in the New York Times, The Atlantic, McSweeney's, and elsewhere. Crane lives in Los Angeles, where he is completing his graphic novel, Keeping Two, which we're going to get a little preview of tonight, that will be published in 2018. So without further ado, Jordan, it's all you. I think you got to go.
Sure, there it's on. First, I want to say thank you to Kristen for having me tonight to talk about her new book with her, and I'm going to be reading from Keeping Two, which kind of shares a bit of some similar themes. It's kind of the ideas of loss and the missing things in the world around us, So just to set this up a little bit, this is an excerpt from the book. It's going to be out in 2018, like Libby said. This is a small excerpt. The whole graphic novel takes place in the space of one night, and it's about this young couple, and they have an apartment together. And then one night she leaves to go to the grocery store, make a quick trip to pick up some groceries, and he stays at home doing dishes, and an hour passes, 2 hours passes, and she should have been home by now. 3 hours, and she's not home yet, and he's here at this point in the book. He's starting to wonder where she's at, and he's having some real bad thoughts about where she might be or what might be happening. One more thing is sort of the visual language of this book. It's pretty simple, but I just want to kind of explain it first, is that a lot of the story takes place, like probably 3/4 of it takes place like in people's thoughts. And so the differentiation between the thoughts people are having and and what's actually happening in the world, the panels with black borders around them are happening in the world, and the thoughts, they don't have any borders on them. So just to clarify that. All right, so here we go. Oh, and I'm just going to let you read it because a lot of it doesn't have words, and I'll kind of read along, and I'll say the words when I get to them, and maybe you'll get to them at the same time. Anyway. Bye. Hi, hon. I can't find that one. We've already seen all the good ones. Tell me you got some ID for me. No, her wallet's gone. Click. Huh? What's that? Ah! Just keep walking. It's not working. 14, 15, breathe. She's lost too much blood. Oh. Hey, lady, excuse me. Christ. Right. Splash. William McLean? Yes or no? Doop, doop. Gulp. Yes, that's her. No. Doop, doop. Gulp. Three days of mail. Catalog, missing. Donation, missing. Coupons, credit card, missing. Catalog, pizza, missing. Abortions, credit, Chinese, Mexican, missing. Fluff. Clump. Oh, sorry about that. Without her, I go on with everything I do every day. Everything I do, just as I always do. Except now, there's no reason for any of it. Bling, bling, bling. Tap, tap. I don't ever want to stop smoking. Never? I always thought one day I'd quit. This morning, I was paralyzed in my bed, the radio on and sunlight through the trees. My whole day was colored gold because of it. I'm driving down Friday night. We'll have 2 days and 2 nights, and on Sunday you're gone again. It's torture. All week long I'm being devoured. Let's live together. All we have is the rest of our lives, and we shouldn't be apart. It's just a waste of time. Doop, doop. Are you still there? You're asleep. Soon. Now? Soon. Soon. We'll find our place. Meow. 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 Right now, the rest of our lives seems like a long time. But it isn't. The sooner we live together, the more time we have. It goes quick. Oh, for Christ's sakes. Clunk. Sip. Blink. Hi, can you page someone for me? Connie Farrell. Yes, sir. One moment. Please hold. Paging Connie Farrell. Please report to the front desk. Call for you. Can she return your call at this number? It's okay, I'll hold. No, sir, I must keep this line open. Thank you. But, hello? Click. After that day, her eyes never set on this wall again or looked through this window, and her hands never turned this knob or lifted this, and her feet never, and her ears, and her fingers, her hair, and neck, legs, lips, never, never, again, not ever, never. Thank you.
Kristen.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for reading with me. You do sound effects better than like anyone I've ever met in my life. Okay. I'm going to try to do a thing with the chords here. Okay. So sometimes this iPad thingy doesn't work, in which case I might ask you to move the slides and I'll read from the book. Okay. But hopefully it will. This is a book about an obsession with ruins and abandoned cities, and it starts, I'll read from early in the book, when I was a college student and a very insufferable young artist. in Chicago. The photography department was down the hall from Andrew's painting studio. I loved the way everything looked in the dark room, smoothed and forgiven, and the sound of it, enclosed and somehow secret, atop the trickle of cold water and chemicals I touched so compulsively that the skin began peeling from my palms. It was there that a classmate told me about Gary, Indiana. We left for Gary around 5 a.m. Well, it's safe, we'd been told. Andrew and I were sophomores in college, used to sleeping into the afternoon. Dawn felt ridiculous. When settlers came to the Midwest, they wove their villages around southeastern Indiana, forming a perimeter encircling the hostile terrain they found there. Indiana was a place where you could drown and dry up at once, sand dunes threaded through swamp. So the land sat empty until 1906, when U.S. Steel bought the 8,000 acres no one wanted. Shipping was simple on the Great Lakes. Railroads could bring ore from Minnesota and coal from almost anywhere. They called Gary, Indiana, the city of the century. The main attraction for us was an abandoned cathedral near the city center. We pulled ourselves up from the snarled foliage of the courtyard and through the stone arches where the walls had fallen, stepping around thick chunks of plaster mazed beneath the collapsing ceiling of the sacristy. The stained glass was still intact below the rafters, too high for rocks or looters. The tarnished petals of a shattered organ lay in the corner, its broken keys like piles of pulled teeth. I imagined the mold-smeared photographs pinned in rows on a gallery's white walls with a video projected across them, some hollow sound we'd record and manipulate. That night, we drank bitter red wine out of mason jars as we compared footage from Gary. We smoked clove cigarettes and thought they made us look sexy. A few days after Andrew and I went to Gary, I found something online about the photographs we took from the cathedral. Local Indiana newspapers reported that a man named Seth Thomas was hit on the Norfolk Southern Railroad line just outside Gary in 2006. Seth wanted to be a photographer, taking panoramic and wide-angle shots of decay, and he called himself an urban explorer. His camera was found shattered near his body. So he was taking a picture of the train, the people who knew Seth Thomas insisted, not jumping in front of it. 8 days after he stood on the tracks, held the camera to his face, and felt or did not feel the train pull his body apart, his friends hosted a memorial service in the abandoned City Methodist Church, his favorite place to photograph. They sealed his pictures tightly in Ziploc bags and spread his ashes. I didn't think about Seth for years, not really, until I was 22 and living in a small Iowa town. The man on the video talked about the train, the memorial in the church, the shrine they built for Seth there. Choppy clips of Seth played at a speed lower than they were filmed, the light pulsing like an old movie projected from a reel across an uneven wall. His face was always obscured. Seth in a baseball cap snapping shots of a lumberyard from a bridge, Seth on a rooftop looking below. The screen froze on the last photo he took, recovered from the memory chip of his smashed camera. I spent weeks trying to find pieces of him in databases and search engines, but never considered contacting anyone, knowing the dust I blew from the surface of the Ziploc bags that held his decaying photographs was likely the ashes his friends had scattered. Instead, I downloaded a picture from Seth's archive. I stare at the picture for a long time, drawing conclusions that are not mine to draw. Ruins are often born in the wake of stasis. That's easy enough to sense. Maybe, I thought, being stuck is what killed Seth. He remained so firmly rooted to that block of Indiana that he was run over by it. Iowa was a place I began leaving constantly to seek out and crawl through gutted mining towns and looted industrial buildings, bombed out barracks and contaminated environmental zones in countries whose languages I couldn't speak, places that excrete warnings of the wars and quakes and depressions they've witnessed. Native Iowans told me about the dangers of all the state's rivers, the flat and modified land that flooded a year before I arrived and formed lakes, roof peaks jutting from the surface like coastal boulders and forming currents across roads, the moldy basements when the water drained the closest thing they had to ruins. Some nights I pulled up the hem of my clothes and clawed at my skin, searching for signs that I was becoming one. I watched the river out my window, and I willed the stagnant water to prove it. Thanks.
Thank you both. It's beautiful to hear it in your voice. It really is. So now we're going to sit up here and have the conversation portion. I will say as a housekeeping note, Brooke Julian, where are you? She makes the best cookies in the world. She made them for us tonight, for you too. So, and there's wine and there's wonderful things. So, Brookie's Cookies, give it up. Okay. Yeah, you're hello. So, I want to talk a little bit with you both about how you found these stories. And then that will sort of lead me into my second question of sort of a theme, if you guys aren't sensing a theme between the two narratives. But I think it might be nice to hear sort of like an origin story. I think we got one.
Yeah. You go first.
An origin story for...
That makes it sound really long. It can just be, any size you wish.
So, I mean, the origin story is really, pretty simple. I tend to have a lot of really kind of negative thoughts about the world, and it's not how, it doesn't mean they actually play out, and it doesn't mean, the world actually ends up being like that, or, the way I see it turning out. But they're kind of entertaining in a way, I guess is why I not entertaining, but they spooling out the present towards the future and, trying to see what that becomes. It causes a lot of anxiety for me, but I think it also creates it's fertile ground for stories, and I think that's probably where a lot of stories maybe originated for a lot of other people too. Even if the whole thing doesn't necessarily hold together, it's still, I think, by virtue of the fact that often the way we spool out the future is drawing on the past, there are often, elements of it that do turn out to be accurate, when we look forward. So, Basically, just I kind of started working with that as a, and it's sort of a microcosm of that. One evening, one small stretch of like 4 or 5 hours, and how many things go through a person's mind in a small amount of time. You go on an epic journey for a small period of time, and I just wanted to explore that. So I think that's
great.
The origin.
I first of all, I forgot to say that I love this bookstore so much, and I'm really happy to be here, and thank you all for coming. And Libby is amazing, and she's such a force, and so I'm really happy to be here.
No big deal.
Anyway, so I went to art school. I mean, I was like always the person who was like failing algebra because I was drawing in class and had limited skills. Went to art school, and then went to graduate school for writing, and was doing them separately. And it took me forever to realize that I could do them both at the same time. But with the project itself, I was just always writing about like sort of hidden histories and aftermath and abandoned places, and I didn't recognize at all that they were part of a book until someone was like, hello. And then it sort of was a very arduous process from there of moving through it, and then giving in when my publisher told me it had to be a memoir.
Just curious for all the writers out there, how long from start to finish?
I feel like that's the hardest question ever, because I feel like first books are sort of your whole life. Like I feel like there was like this need to put in like everything I'd ever felt, and but I would say like sort of consciously 5 years.
Yeah. There's hope. So this is sort of like thematically, like I said, I'm reading both of your books, and just full disclosure, Jordan gave us a sneak peek. So what you saw was a little bit. So we saw like 218 pages of keeping to. So
That's where I'm at right now. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so when I'm reading them both, I'm thinking you've both confronted grief in totally different ways. Jordan, there's 3 characters, and correct me if I'm wrong, that die or disappear. So you saw the woman that went to the grocery store, there's an infant that dies. And Kristen, you confront the loss of a beloved uncle, and I would say a loss of a relationship too. And so I'm sitting there thinking, like, once you've decided on this theme, or once you kind of know you're writing towards this, as far as like writing and illustrating this, did you know how this was going to look? And what made me think about it was, like, Kristen, you would also, in a large frame, you were very small sometimes. Mm-hmm. And with Jordan, like with you, when you, for the infant, when the mother's in her deepest grief, the child shows up as an outline. And so, like, I think we were seeing the woman as an outline. So can you just talk about sort of how that comes to?
Yeah, that's a really, I think probably Jordan can speak to this better than I can, because part of the process of this book was just teaching myself how to draw cartoons, and so I just did it in the way that was most natural to me. So I think it wasn't towards the end that I thought, well, what if I try these certain things? I mean, for me, the first year of writing this book was about asking myself, like, what am I allowed to do in this medium? And then sort of I gave, into trying new things. But, talking about drawing grief, there's something very strange about it, and I think it, I had to draw a number of times someone who loved very much, who was dead, and thinking about, what do his ears look like? What do his hands look like? Things like this. You sort of have to consider a person in a way that you probably wouldn't normally. And I think it keeps you in that grief space for, like, way longer than you would normally be, for me at least.
Yeah. One of the things I liked is that you, when you were writing about, somebody who was very dear to you, you wrote about more the life of the person rather than their, your grief specifically, but so the grief kind of comes through, and the sort of longing and the missing really comes through because of, your clarity on his life. I thought that worked really well.
Thanks.
And Jordan, just to speak to the dotted outline piece, was that always like an intention there for those lost people?
Yeah, well, the two kind of biggest things in the language of the visual language of this book. the two sort of things that when I was starting out I struggled with a lot. I mean, they both have really obvious answers, but and they seem so simple. But I guess that probably shows that they're a decent answer to it. But was showing how showing people missing and showing people's thoughts. Because I really wanted to kind of go into one as they think through something, And yeah, so the dotted outline, I mean, we've all cut coupons out, it's just, I was dot it, and it, visually it has a nice feel to it, and so, it communicates that in a very kind of cartoony way that is simple and direct.
Right. Well, it's powerful because it's not continuous. Like, we don't see Dan all the time. You know what I mean? We get flashes and pieces of him, and like Jordan's saying, like really, really important details, like the things that you're going to carry through. And I think that if in every frame the infant was outlined, it would have that less power. So I think there's something very potent about the way you guys carry grief through both of your books. So I have one more sort of combined question, and then we're just going to start darting questions at you. Okay, awesome. So the other theme here is how we find logic in loss, like how we make sense of it, how the human brain is like, I'm going to figure this out. And that's sort of illustrated in how you go into figuring out the heart disease piece and like doing the research. That's how her uncle passes away. He has a degenerative heart defect. And so there's a lot of like, I'm going to figure this out. And I even think visiting the ruins in a way is a sort of making sense of that, like making sense of what's gone. And then Jordan, like there's that loop, like where you're saying that people are having these dream moments and having these dream moments, and there's sort of like this repetitive thinking where that thought is like, I'm going to make sense of this. I'm going to sort of return to this. That's scary. Okay. So I'm trying to kind of, when I saw both of those happen in both of your books, what I understood there was sort of like, here are two people in some ways trying to make sense of grief, trying to make sense of loss, which is an unbelievably human thing to do, and in such an interesting way too. And can you speak to kind of looking at that, or if you noticed that in that when you were drawing that narrative?
Yeah, I mean, I think like writing essays or writing nonfiction. I mean, I wrote this book sort of as a collection of essays and then reworked it as more of a continuous narrative. But for me, I think, and for a lot of essays and essayists, we're all working to sort of drive something out or to make sense of something. And I don't feel like I came to any conclusions at the end, which certain reviewers have taken issue with. But I was sort of just interested in having an exploration and sort of, leaving adrift in the way that I still was, in the way that, many readers are.
Yeah. And also just like we get further into your brain. Do you know what I mean? So I think that like even like she calls doctors to sort of get an idea of sort of getting more information that can't be found in a study, and she's like, I'm a reporter. Do you know what I mean? It tells a lot about who you are, but also you seek out all these obscure places where most people wouldn't want to be, that most people would be frightened to be, like an abandoned church and abandoned homes, abandoned cities. So I think that was like also a nice way to like just slowly reveal you as a character. It's weird to talk about you as a character, but it's you. Yeah. Jordan, were you going to say something?
Well,
speak to that.
I mean, one of the things I thought was interesting was how you use this person as kind of a placeholder for how a human becomes a ruin, and it created this resonance where when you're exploring actual like physical ruins, that it speaks about people as well, and but like I said, since you weren't really, it was just because he was there and you were bringing it up. It wasn't something you ever actually underlined and said like, look, people become ruins too, Right. It was just, but it was this kind of the harmony of the ideas just kind of floating there, brought a particular like poignancy to, made the ruins human, I guess,
this is more of like an origin idea or question. So I read somewhere that you were like, so the history and the ruins part and the sort of, all of those elements are sort of in place. You were saying you were writing essays about this, and the personal part, which is her uncle and the relationship and the way her sort of, I mean, every chapter is a chapter, in order of your life. That came later, like the personal pieces. Yeah. Can you talk about approaching that as the secondary thing, or were you afraid of that? Was that scarier to write about?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'll ever do it again. I mean, like, I will never. I was so. I drew myself probably 500 times in this book. Like, that it's an absurd thing to do. I will never do it again. But my editors were pretty insistent about it, and basically my agent had sent them a collection of graphic essays, and they said we wanted if she'll make it a memoir. And I thought about this for a while, but the way that it was, I mean, Dan Frank, who's the editor-in-chief of Pantheon, who's edited, Art Spiegelman and Marjane Satrapi and Chris Ware and Charles Burns and so many amazing comics artists, he really did understand the project and the need for a visual guide. And I mean, basically what I had sent them was a graphic novel that contained almost no people. And he was like, well, we need some people.
So it was just the ruins?
No, I mean, like, I was writing a lot about history. A lot of the history stuff got cut, and it was really hard to draw history because I didn't have photos to look at, and to reconstruct scenes felt very difficult, and I was concerned about getting them right. And I think that they were right that they needed a visual guide, to like a visual character to pull us through, because that's how we read comics. We read them through characters that are recognizable to us. So in the end, I think it made sense. But it was, I think, especially in grad school, we have this, which I was just coming out of, we have this sort of like negative association with the word memoir, which is silly. But I think, it's like sort of a feminized term, and it's seen as somehow less serious than essays. So I think
because it really happened.
Yeah, or because it's about yourself, or it must be more emotional and less intellectual, or a whole slew of reasons. But it's just a marketing term. Like, who cares really what it's called?
Were there memoirs that you looked at when you were in that space, when you're like, okay, this personal element's coming through, that you looked to for inspiration?
Yeah, like, the obvious ones like Alison Bechdel, Art Spiegelman, Marjane Satrapi, sort of the famous graphic memoirs, I think, were my first access point to them, because I had not read a lot of graphic nonfiction.
And then just text only, like just a traditional memoir. Did you read any?
Yeah. I read a lot of essay collections. I mean, that's still probably my favorite thing to read, and book length. That's hard to say. I love a lot of different genres, but.
I think you said, I heard you say Joan Didion.
I mean, Joan Didion. I'm so sick of saying Joan Didion, because everyone's like, well, duh.
You guys like Joan Didion, right? Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, there's nobody like Joan Didion.
Yeah, it's true.
Do you have it? I was going to just...
Oh, I was just... When you said it was really difficult drawing yourself over, I mean, that was... Because, when I'm doing Keeping Two, it's more or less about, it starts with sort of it being about me, but it's my experiences, but early on, one of the only ways I found I could, like, write about it is to make that not me, to, like, separate, like, I can't write about myself, because then, but in doing so, was able to kind of step back and have more sort of liberty with what's going on, rather than thinking, it's really hard to draw yourself.
It is, but it's also it's hard in not in a technical way, because I think it's so like you're always there when you're drawing, so you can always be your model. Exactly. So I think that's really how I think I learned how to draw people in a cartoony way, was by looking at myself, because you can only ask your friends to come over and sit around for so long. So I think that in that way it's easy, but then it's also it's hard because especially when it's nonfiction, it's like you're putting a drawing of yourself out there, and you're saying not only is this what I look like, but you're also saying this is how I see myself, right. And then you're opening yourself up to all kinds of criticism. I think.
And that's hard, but you did it. It's a tough thing to go through. Just kind of to sort of full disclosure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you went to art school, so you had some you had some experience.
Yeah, but it
there,
was like like charcoal drawings of and
Right.
it's like never
nothing that was helpful in this
any
space.
way.
Yeah.
Can I ask what was your approach to with the how did you pair the words in the pictures? Like, what was it? Did you start out? Because you said you had some essays that you had written.
Yeah.
Did you start out with those and approach it like illustrating the essays and was there a point when the two started talking to one another? Kind of.
Yeah. At first, I was just trying to translate the text into images and putting huge chunks of text over small images, which didn't work. But I was also just I was so new to drawing comics that it was just so overwhelming to draw anything. So I was like, what's the first thing I can think of? That's what I'll draw, and then I'll move on to the next square. And it was just sort of this anxiety of I need to fill this up because this is taking so long. I just need to fill this blank square. And then you go back and you expand things and you get more comfortable and you basically my sort of policy in the end is if I can say it with a drawing, I say it with a drawing and not with text. And if I can't, then I use text. But I think it's much better when I don't know how you feel, but when it works sort of at the same time. Sometimes I'll draw a very short or write out a very short script, and then or sometimes the image will come first. But when I move back and forth between the two, I think the scenes are better.
Yeah.
That was one of my questions on here. Does illustrating, does it make you a better writer?
I don't know. I think maybe it makes you a worse writer. Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly can't. It's really hard for me to put my thoughts into words.
Yeah.
I can do it, but man, it's a totally different brain space. Whereas I feel like I can't separate the words and the pictures. It's hard for me to just draw a picture and be like, oh, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
But when you have a word and a picture, the two make a kind of third resonance that kind of can communicate in a way that I can't do with words as easily.
Yeah. I also just think you get used to drawing and then writing, and you can get away with writing so much less when you're drawing as well. Mm-hmm. And writing is, for me, writing is much harder than drawing, but drawing takes more time because it's just so laborious. Right. But it takes forever. But
that's the thing. If you could actually write it all out, you'd be done.
You'd be done
in a year.
Yeah.
You'd be like, psh, it's over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it would be horrible. It would be a horrible experience because writing is you have to be fresh and present, and I can come home from a long day and sit down and draw and be have some wine and I'll be fine. But if I were to do that when I was writing, it would just be I just probably wouldn't do it. Right. And you can motivate yourself to draw and be I'll just put on Law and Order SVU in the background and listen to that while I draw. And it's sort of you can just get yourself through that space when you need to. I think coming up with the idea of what to draw and mapping it out takes a lot of intellectual work. But then once you can see it in your mind, it's just execution for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I go back and forth. Sometimes I can, I can listen to stories. I love listen. It's great to the perfect place is to be in front of a drawing board with a book on tape and you just kind of go for it. But I'm finding later, more and more frequently, it's really hard for me to listen or do anything else when I'm drawing. I don't know if that's just because I'm getting older and I can't split my attention, or I'm not exactly sure, but it's really hard for me to separate. And so unfortunately that means that it's I need to have more. I can't do as many things. I can't I can never watch TV when I'm drawing. I just watch TV.
Just to kind of introduce the idea, it's clearly an obsession of yours, abandoned places and ruins, and I went down a rabbit hole too. You kind of made me a little obsessed with this. And there's this thing called runophilia. Mm-hmm. This is a thing. So it's a fascination for ruins, and it's throughout the book. And one sort of, I was trying to think of how can we really, for people who haven't spent time in the book, one sort of great example of this in the book is that she goes to Italy to get away from everything and to visit some ruins. And so, but in Italy, they're all roped off and they're polished and they're security guards, and it's like they're guiding you through this sort of sacred space. And it's in the book, I think there's a scene where you write it down and you say, "I'm so lonely," and then you spend the rest of your time in a room, like in your hotel room or what have you, just looking up online pictures of ruins. And so, like, that to me I was like, that kind of perfectly says the point of view of where you're at. And can you kind of talk about where that comes from, because it's deep, and also, I mean, my question, sort of thinking about that scene, was, do you think part of being like a true ruin is it has to be abandoned, like it can't be displayed and taken care of in that way or housed?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I wish that I had just been on a trip and I was just in a hotel room, but I did that for a year in Italy.
Oh,
I was like nannying, and then at night I'd just be like,
you were there first,
looking up Pripyat, Ukraine, like what's going on there, and I don't know. I think it's a really common fascination. I think all you have to do is type ruin porn or abandoned places or whatever into Google Images, and there'll be just like a bajillion. Like it's a whole.
I did it.
Yeah. I mean, people are totally fascinated in a way that is sometimes really dangerous in terms of the way that certain places are completely misunderstood. Like, I think the way that Detroit has been portrayed has been horribly unethical. But I don't totally know. I think for me, contemporary ruins are so much more interesting to me than sort of, we can look at the Acropolis or the Parthenon or the Colosseum and sort of marvel at it in these ways, and it can seem so separate from the life that we have now. But if we see something, from 50 years ago, or that looks sort of like the town that we grew up in, and that's empty too, that's sort of when the questions of mortality come in.
And it's more haunting, and there's a realness there that would frighten a lot of people, that they wouldn't want to look at that. Jordan, did you? Yeah.
So one of the favorite ruins of mine in this book wasn't actually ruins. It was this, this particular part of the book felt chillingly prescient. It was very timely, and so there's these. Where are they? Utah. Yeah. So there's these military bases where in Utah they built just tons of houses, and they were furnished, and so it's like this sort of brand new, but no people were living in there, because this is like it's a testing base, and so there's no people living there, and so it's like you get this kind of meta ruin where it's this brand new, uninhabited ghost town, and then you sort of tie this together with a fire that had taken place near the Great Lakes
in Passageways, Wisconsin.
Yeah, in Wisconsin, yeah, and how the military was studying this fire because it was an unusual fire in that this sort of circular firestorm was created where you had this just almost rain of fire, or kind of this just cloud or tornado of fire just like moving through this town, just burning everything. And the military then studies this to go, how can we reproduce this? They create these incendiary bombs, and then they use this entirely vacant city. I mean, with full, they actually put furniture in all of the. Yeah, I mean, this is like some of the most horrifying research I've ever done. So the fire you're talking about is in Passageways, Wisconsin. It was the deadliest fire in American history. Happens on the same day as the Chicago fire. It killed 3,000 people, whereas the Chicago fire killed less than 300. It burned 1 million acres of land. The fire was so intense, it jumped across Lake Michigan, lit Michigan on fire. The sky was literally on fire. It's completely horrific. And then by the time that the fire was over, some people tried to send for help, but the telegraph lines were down, and so all of the state officials had gone to Chicago to offer their help, and everyone just sort of died slowly for weeks. Horrifying. Then the government, during World War II,
is like, do you recall this horrible thing that happened? How can we sort of create firebombs that do the same thing? And so then they built villages like those reminiscent or identical to those in Dresden and Tokyo. They flew in furniture and like wall coverings and everything to make it exactly like it would be. And I mean, they had cribs built like out of the same exact wood that would have been used in Germany, and then they dropped bombs over and over and over again to see how fast they could make it burn. So,
and the thing is, like, when you look at and so again, talking about civilization in terms of a human, or relating this back to a human body, and when the human body starts killing itself, basically, this particular town then becomes this kind of study in how so they build this ruin, but then they're building this ruin in order to create more, in order to figure out how to most efficiently create more spaces in this planet that are ruins. And that's where it starts really kind of doing this double wavelength of magnifying, the in the speed of the creation of nothing, which is totally terrifying. And and then of course, reading this in 2017, it really kind of makes me choke on my drink.
We're just here to lift you up.
Yeah.
I think we'll do maybe one more question and open it up to you guys. There's more drinks and fun and signing and book buying to be had.
Which is to say is beautiful. I mean, I don't need to...
Yes, no, it is beautiful.
It was many levels of...
Yeah, I mean, the juxtaposition of what you found and the histories of what you found and the way you walk us through them, it's exquisite. I mean, it's gorgeous looking and horrifying simultaneously.
Yeah.
Which is sometimes people's favorite. So I was like, okay. So there seems to be a dichotomy between the idea of permanence and loss of place. So that's sort of like kind of rounding through the ruins piece. And I posted it today, so everybody knows this, but that knows me here. But my two favorite lines in the book that I felt like I just stopped on that page, and both of your books made me cry. So I don't know if that says more about you or me, but that this page was gorgeous, and the two lines are: I didn't want to sit still, but I didn't want to lose anything either. I wanted to gather more without giving anything up, and that sort of brought me to a place in the book where it's interesting because the book kind of releases you into these spaces and then holds you in these spaces, and then emotively it propels you out. I won't give away the ending, but in a way at the end that is just, it makes it feel kind of enormous and grand, and I'm not going to say any other adjectives because you decide yourself, but I like the ending. Well, I guess my question is, in those lines and in that holding and letting go, even internally as yourself as this character, were you sort of aware of that tension? Were you aware of that push-pull? Were you aware of that, like, in layman's terms, should I stay or should I go? Because it kind of kept occurring as you were leaving places and going places.
Yeah. I don't know if I was aware of it really in the writing of the book as much as it is just like how I feel every day.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really common feeling, especially for people who move around a lot, or who feels often disconnected from where they are. And so I think I've gone through a lot of phases where I have this frantic phase where I just want to grab everything I can. And I think that was a sort of restlessness that probably propelled most of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. And then, Jordan, if you had a closing question or anything?
I just, in that sort of gathering, where you have this compulsion to go out and see all the ruins before, they're going to be there for, they're not going anywhere.
Well,
but that's the thing. Maybe you are, and that's I guess the kind of scary thing about being, sort of human as opposed to these ruins, which are, they're there. But to talk to that compulsion of wanting to see it before, whatever, it's gone, you're gone, whatever happens, I It reminded me, I've had several friends of mine go, say, "Oh, I'm taking a cruise. We're going to go up and we're going to see all of the, icebergs in Alaska. We're going to go up and watch them crumble." And,
contribute to it with their boat.
Right, exactly.
Pretty much.
But that's sort of, that's just kind of, that struck me as like, wow, there's a sort of environmental ruin tourism that's going.
Yeah, I think
seems to be going
Lonely
on
Planet,
right now.
I think, has a book or one of those travel companies that's like 500 places to see before they disappear or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, an interesting, right. By having the tourist industry around it, it's just, another sort of, it's another aspect of why they're going away in the first place, And, how are we going to be civilization without becoming a ruin is, really.
We won't.
I don't.
My book literally ends with the apocalypse, so
Yeah.
we know where
Spoiler
I stand.
alert. Yeah, I mean, I guess okay, fine. I have one last question. So, sort of, the compulsion to see these places and to search them out and to find new places and spending a lot of time drawing these places. And are you cured of ruinophilia?
I don't want to think about ruins again for like a really long
Awesome.
time. Like I don't want to. I feel totally done. And I feel like every time I give a reading, someone's like, "Oh, you have to go see this place," and I'm like, "Yeah, and I just like, but I don't know. I think
I did that when I came.
no, but it was a place that it's very. I mean, sure. It's very beautiful, but I don't know. I think I don't know how most people feel after spending. I mean, this book was like 1,400 drawings. Like there's just no better way to drive something out of you than to spend that much time thinking about that thing.
So maybe you're cured of it, but you still think like disastrous thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, don't we?
Cool.
Are we all thinking disastrous thoughts right now? Yeah.
I'm going to answer for you guys. Okay. I had this other question about Don DeLillo and garbage and underworld, but I'll just ask you that privately. Okay, guys. So it's on you now. Questions. Yes. Yes, no, yes, you.
You mentioned, this is actually more of a comment, but you mentioned that sometimes if you can say it in a picture, you don't have to say it in words. But the thing that I loved about this book, one of the many things I loved about this book, was the fact that oftentimes you use words and not pictures. And you did that mostly in the Passageways fire. This idea that, burning horses where, all they had left was their clothes.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I really loved about this, is sometimes you use pictures when you absolutely had to, but there was these moments that made me fill in the gaps with my own mind. It was scarier than anything that could have been drawn. You mentioned like people escaping by jumping underwater and then coming up for air every few minutes. Like that was absolutely horrifying.
Yeah.
Book, even though it has pictures, it really taps into that empty space that we can fill.
Yeah.
With our own horrific.
Thanks. That's really nice. Yeah, I feel like I only wrote those though because I just didn't know how to draw a horse that was on fire. But I love that it worked. I mean, I think sometimes it's just like, especially when I was doing the history sections, I just was so. I mean, Joe Sacco talked about this when he wrote his book, The Great War, and he was talking about how he felt like it was his biggest failure of a book because he didn't have photos to work from, and he was like, I think the explosions were wrong, And it's a very beautiful book, but I think I had a lot of anxiety about how to draw those things that I couldn't picture at all. Yeah. So thanks for saying so.
I just wanted to say about that fire. There's another. It's Annie Proulx, I believe is how you pronounce it. Her most recent book, Barkskins, has it's all about kind of lumber or the timber industry throughout like 400 years, and there's a fire scene in sequence, much like this. Just obliterating fire, and that's there's a scene where somebody lives through it by going underwater and kind of surviving, and it's good, and that I guess no pictures at all, but
I saw a hand back there. Yeah, you.
Yeah, I'm curious. I haven't read the book. I'm excited to. We're talking about a lot of terrifying, horrifying things. I'm curious about the title, Pantheon is.
Yeah.
What does that refer to? Does it give anything away to
It is a line from the book. I think it's sort of, for me, it came out of this not abandoned at all. I don't know why I said abandoned. I just say that a lot.
We've just been saying.
Yeah. This island off the coast of Iceland, which was covered entirely in volcanic ash. And after all of the ash had dried and the lava had dried, most of the inhabitants of the island came back and rebuilt the town on the other side of the island. And I just thought that was the most extraordinary thing, to sort of love someplace enough to want to stay. And I was sort of, I think a lot of the restlessness that I felt when I was writing this book was sort of just a hope that I could sort of want to claim something sort of that ferociously for myself.
It's another beautiful page when you get to it.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah. KK.
I was just wondering, first of all, the selection that you chose and the way in which you displayed it was really fantastic.
Thanks.
Thank you. But I was wondering, finding the memorial and then sort of what appears to be from the selection was that you punished yourself or you criticized yourself for, what it appears you deemed as being careless or thoughtless. Did you ever, and I haven't yet read the book, but did you at any point move into a more fatalistic space where you were thinking, as a part of the great cosmic experience, I am a piece of it with this guy Seth, and then I came, and now I'm continuing the story of this memorial, and it's all a piece of some cosmic mystery.
Yeah.
Did you, that was free from criticism, free from, considering yourself to have been thoughtless or whatever.
Yeah.
Did you ever inhabit that space?
Yeah, I think so. Although I think that probably there's no writer, especially writer writing about themselves, who feels free from criticism at any moment when they're writing. But yeah, I think that was sort of the conclusion I tried to push myself towards, for sure. Yeah.
And they're kind of, I find them to be a magical object in your story. So they reoccur and they tell a lot about a lot about you. Do you know what I mean? Like I won't tell you what happens to him.
I think also the way I read the photos was, you talk about ruins coming from stasis, and those photos were in stasis before you unearthed them, and then they become out of stasis, and so it's almost like this person is having another, type of life.
Yeah. And like KK is saying, there's this guilt carryover that ends up becoming kind of a weird motivation in a way.
Interesting.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much, and thank you too. And this is wonderful. Yeah. Cookies, wine, books.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.